I came home to find HOA President Dolores Manning literally auctioning my 40-acre ranch to her nephew for $500. But here's the part that'll make your blood boil. This psycho had hired a crew to chainsaw down my great-grandfather's century-old oak trees while I was working out of state. I'm talking about irreplaceable trees worth 20 grand each, planted by hand in 1923. The moment I turned into my driveway, chainsaws were screaming like banshees, ripping through 100-year-old wood. The sickly sweet smell of fresh sawdust mixed with the chemical stench of bright orange spray paint. This maniac had marked my family heritage trees like livestock for slaughter. An industrial wood chipper was literally eating the limbs of trees that survived the Dust Bowl, and when I jumped out of my truck screaming, Dolores smiled and said, "Your property maintenance violations are finally being corrected." What would you do if some power-drunk Karen was destroying 4 generations of your family's legacy for a HOA power trip? Comment below if you've dealt with these neighborhood dictators. And tell me where you're watching from because I need backup. Let me back up and tell you how this nightmare started. My name's Jake Thornfield, and I'm a 3rd-generation owner of a 40-acre ranch in Copper Ridge, Texas. My grandfather bought this land in 1940 for $300. Nowadays, it's worth $2.8 million, sitting right where developers are salivating to build their next suburban paradise. I work as a freelance petroleum engineer, traveling 2 to 3 weeks monthly for contracts. The money's good, especially after my divorce lawyer got creative with asset division and my 2 kids discovered college tuition costs more than my first house. The ranch keeps me sane. A restored 1940s main house, guest cabin, and a barn that survived more storms than most politicians survive scandals. Now meet your villain. Dolores Manning slithered into our community 8 years ago from some Dallas McMansion development. Within 2 years, she'd clawed her way to HOA president like a piranha in a goldfish bowl. Picture this. Hair so perfectly coiffed it could survive a tornado, designer workout clothes that have never seen actual sweat, and oversized sunglasses she wears indoors because natural light might reveal her soul. She drives a white BMW X7 with vanity plates reading President, because subtlety died with her conscience. The morning coffee at my kitchen table started tasting different when diesel fumes from distant construction mixed with the air. That's when my peaceful life ended. Here's where municipal politics screwed me, and this matters if you own property anywhere in America. My ranch had sat outside town limits for 80 years, but the city council redrew boundaries to capture our area for tax revenue. That boundary change automatically enrolled my property into the Copper Ridge Estates HOA, without my knowledge or consent. I was on a 3-week job in North Dakota when the certified letter arrived. The thick legal paper felt like a death warrant as I read it over satellite phone. Fresh toner ink smell mixed with my growing panic. $500 monthly HOA dues, retroactive 6 months. $3,000, due immediately. I called Dolores from the oil rig, explaining I never agreed to join any HOA. Her response chilled me to the bone. "The law is the law, Mr. Thornfield. You can't pick and choose which community standards apply to people like you." That phrase, "people like you," told me everything about her real motivations. Hours researching municipal statutes revealed the legal trap. Automatic enrollment is perfectly legal if proper paperwork gets filed. I paid under protest, assuming the nightmare was over. Dead wrong. Dolores immediately scheduled a property compliance inspection for the exact day I left for my next job. My neighbor Martha Gonzalez, a retired teacher with 30 years of watching neighborhood drama, pulled me aside. "Jake, that woman's been measuring your property with surveying equipment, taking photos, asking about your work schedule." The taste of stale gas station coffee turned bitter when I spotted someone with a telephoto lens photographing my ranch from the road. Professional equipment, serious documentation. But here's what really should have terrified me. I drove past the courthouse on my way out of town and saw Dolores's BMW in the parking lot at 7 a.m. on a Saturday. Nobody goes to the courthouse on Saturday morning unless they're planning something that requires official paperwork. I kept telling myself she was just being thorough. New HOA member, got to learn the rules, right? My property was immaculate. Historical buildings maintained to museum standards. 3 horses on 40 acres of pristine pasture. Natural creek that actually increased everyone's property values. What could possibly violate any reasonable standard? The crunch of gravel under my truck tires as I left for North Dakota sounded different that morning, like a countdown timer starting, like the last time I'd drive away from my ranch as a free man. I had no idea Dolores saw my family legacy as her personal ATM machine, or that she'd already started the paperwork to steal everything my grandfather built. My truck engine warming up at 4 a.m. sounded like freedom. 18 days in Wyoming's Powder River Basin meant 85 grand and escape from HOA drama. The taste of gas station coffee mixed with diesel exhaust as I hit the road, thinking my Dolores problems were solved. The crunch of gravel under my tires felt peaceful, normal. 3 days later, my phone exploded. Martha Gonzalez called while I was rigging equipment on a drilling platform, her voice shaking. "Jake, you need to sit down." Another certified letter came. 47 separate HOA violations. Let that sink in. 47. Unapproved structures included my 1943 barn, my 1952 guest cabin, and my workshop that was older than Dolores's entire bloodline. Excessive vegetation covered the wildflower meadow that prevented erosion and supported native wildlife. My natural creek became an uncontrolled water feature. But here's where the crazy train really left the station. Commercial activity because I parked my work trucks on my own damn property. Livestock violations because 3 horses on 40 acres somehow exceeded suburban density standards. My weathered fence posts had excessive aging appearance. The gravel in my driveway was aesthetically inconsistent with community standards. The crown jewel of this insanity, horse manure created olfactory disturbance to neighboring properties. Apparently, my horses were supposed to poop roses. I remembered reading somewhere that structures predating an HOA by more than 5 years couldn't be retroactively regulated, something called grandfather clause protection. Every building on my ranch was older than disco music, let alone Dolores's reign of terror. Martha kept feeding me intelligence reports. Dolores was camping at my ranch 6 hours daily with professional surveying equipment, measuring everything like she was planning D-Day, taking photos from every angle, scribbling notes on clipboards, acting like she owned the place. That's when I made the call that saved my bacon. Vernon Bulldog Hayes had 30 years of experience gutting HOA overreach. His gravelly voice cut through the Wyoming wind. "Son, they're trying to steamroll you with violations that won't hold up in court. Your grandfather clause protection is bulletproof if we can prove construction dates." But Dolores was just getting warmed up. Emergency HOA board meeting, called while I was 1,500 miles away, naturally. She convinced the board that my property posed immediate health and safety risks requiring emergency action. 4 members voted to impose daily fines until violations were corrected. $200 per day, starting immediately. The metallic taste of panic mixed with Wyoming dust as I calculated the math. At this rate, she could bankrupt me before I finished the job. Martha's next call revealed the pattern I should have seen coming. Dolores had used identical tactics on the previous ranch owner. The Williams family endured months of harassment before selling below market value just to escape. Same playbook. Impossible violations, crushing fines, financial pressure until surrender. Other neighbors started sharing their horror stories. The Hendersons got nailed for growing tomatoes because vegetables violated agricultural restrictions in residential zones. The Martinez family paid $15,000 for landscaping corrections to avoid daily fines. Always targeting families who couldn't fight back, always pushing until they broke. By day 12, my fines hit $2,400. Bulldog filed emergency injunctions, but the message was clear. Dolores could bleed me dry while I worked out of state to pay for the bleeding. That's when Martha dropped the nuclear bomb. "Jake, I've been watching her routine. Every afternoon she parks at the courthouse, then drives to your ranch with what looks like construction blueprints spread on her passenger seat. Professional architectural drawings. The Wyoming sagebrush smell mixed with the distant rumble of drilling rigs as this sank in. Dolores wasn't harassing me for HOA compliance, she was planning to steal my ranch." "There's more," Martha whispered. "I saw her nephew Brad at the property yesterday. He was pacing off distances and taking measurements near your oak trees, the same trees she's trying to get removed for violations. My grandfather planted those oaks in 1923, each one worth 20 grand to landscaping companies, irreplaceable heritage trees that Dolores wanted gone for community standards. Suddenly, the violations made perfect sense. She wasn't trying to force compliance, she was building a legal case for forced sale, death by 1,000 cuts. bleed me financially until I couldn't fight anymore, then swoop in with a solution that benefited her family. The taste of truck stop coffee turned to ash as I realized 47 violations were just her opening move. While I was working to pay the fines, she was planning her endgame. This wasn't about HOA rules. This was about a $2.8 million ranch that stood between Dolores and her retirement plan. Game on. I cut my Wyoming job short after 14 days, kissing goodbye to $20,000 in lost wages. The airplane cabin's recycled air tasted like defeat as I flew home, knowing Dolores had used every day of my absence to twist the knife deeper. When I landed in Houston, the fines had hit $2,800, but that was chump change compared to what waited in my mailbox. Dolores had filed a mechanic's lien against my ranch for $15,000. Emergency repairs necessary for community safety. According to her courthouse filing, my property posed immediate flood hazards to elderly downstream neighbors, requiring urgent drainage improvements and hazardous tree removal to prevent catastrophic weather-related casualties. The beautiful part? Not 1 second of actual work had been performed. I drove straight from the airport, my hands shaking with rage as I unlocked my front door, the taste of stale airline peanuts mixed with pure fury. My security cameras told the real story. Footage showing Dolores never setting foot on my property except to measure my creek depth with a yardstick while wearing designer heels and a white Chanel pantsuit. Real emergency flood repairs don't involve manicured nails and $1,000 outfits, but that fraudulent lien had created a legal cloud on my property title, blocking any sale or refinancing until resolved. During my divorce, I'd learned the hard way that mechanics' liens could backfire catastrophically when proven fraudulent. Courts awarded triple damages plus attorney fees to victims of lien fraud. Dolores was playing with legal dynamite, betting I was too broke to light the fuse. Time to prove her wrong. Bulldog Hayes and I compiled an evidence package that would make prosecutors weep with joy. Video footage proving zero work performed. Photo comparisons showing my property unchanged. Security camera shots of Dolores's BMW parked at the courthouse during fraudulent filing. Neighbor witness statements confirming no repair crews, no equipment, no emergency of any kind. The smoking gun, high-definition footage of Dolores assessing flood damage by dipping her yardstick into ankle-deep creek water, then immediately sanitizing her hands with designer hand cream. But she wasn't finished destroying my life. Emergency board meeting number 2 featured Dolores claiming I'd become hostile and threatening toward community volunteers. She proposed hiring external property inspectors for comprehensive safety assessment, suggesting my travel schedule made me fundamentally unsuitable for responsible rural property ownership. The metallic taste of panic filled my mouth reading those meeting minutes. 3 board members were questioning her methods, but fear kept them silent. Nobody wanted to become Dolores's next target. That's when Martha Gonzalez called an emergency neighborhood meeting. 6 families crowded into her kitchen, and every story was identical. Dolores harassment campaigns targeting properties her family wanted to develop. She contacted my nephew Brad about development opportunities 3 months before your first violation, whispered Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman whose vegetable garden had been declared agriculturally non-compliant. She's not responding to problems, Jake. She's creating them. I started recording every interaction with Dolores, keeping my phone ready whenever that white BMW appeared in my driveway. But the real breakthrough came when I decided to go full surveillance mode. I installed hidden cameras in tree hollows and fence posts, covering every inch of my property boundaries. The smell of fresh-turned earth mixed with my growing determination as I planted posts in strategic locations. If this suburban dictator wanted to escalate, I'd document every illegal step. Martha's intelligence network revealed Dolores was getting desperate. Our area's property values were exploding as suburban development accelerated. Every month my ranch stayed undeveloped meant lost profits for whatever scheme she was running with her nephew. Her desperation showed during board meeting number 3. Dolores pushed for community safety ordinances, allowing HOA management of properties owned by chronically absent residents. Translation: she wanted legal authority to control my ranch while I traveled for work. I could taste the insanity, like bitter coffee mixed with sawdust and broken dreams. This woman was literally trying to legislate herself into ownership of my family's legacy through HOA bureaucracy. But her biggest mistake was underestimating my grandfather's DNA. That man survived the Dust Bowl, built this ranch from nothing during the Great Depression, and raised a family on pure, stubborn determination. His blood ran through my veins, and no Dallas transplant with delusions of grandeur was stealing what he built. I started researching federal civil rights violations, documenting patterns of selective enforcement and discriminatory targeting. If Dolores wanted to escalate with fraudulent liens and fake emergencies, I'd introduce her to actual federal felony charges. The security cameras were rolling, the financial paper trail was building, the community was waking up. Dolores thought she was closing her trap, but she'd actually stepped into mine. And unlike her amateur hour harassment campaign, my trap was about to snap shut with federal-grade consequences. She was about to learn the difference between petty power and real consequences. 3 weeks into documenting Dolores's every move, she dropped her nuclear bomb. I was checking gear for a 21-day Alaska job, 85 grand I desperately needed after legal fees bled my savings dry, when certified mail arrived that made my hands shake. Notice of delinquent property auction. My 40-acre ranch. $2.8 million worth of family legacy, being auctioned for unpaid fines and fraudulent liens. Reserve price, $500. Auction date, exactly when I'd be on a drilling platform in the Arctic Ocean, 1,500 miles from the nearest courthouse. The paper crinkled like breaking bones as I read the details. The taste of morning coffee turned metallic, like blood and betrayal. Dolores had orchestrated this timing with surgical precision. She knew my Alaska schedule down to the hour. Texas law allows accelerated foreclosure for abandoned properties when owners can't be reached. Dolores had convinced the board I was chronically unresponsive, presenting a falsified timeline that ignored my documented replies to every communication. But something nagged at me. This felt too perfect, too planned. That weekend, I drove to the courthouse and started pulling public records. What I found made my blood freeze solid. Brad Manning had filed construction permits 3 months before my first violation notice. 3 months before Dolores ever claimed my fence posts were too weathered or my horses were too numerous. The permit specified luxury subdivision development, with architectural drawings showing my ranch house bulldozed and replaced with 8 cookie-cutter McMansions. Financing arranged, construction contracts signed, tree removal scheduled. All before my first violation. The smell of dusty courthouse records mixed with my growing rage as I photocopied everything. This wasn't harassment escalating to theft. This was premeditated robbery disguised as HOA enforcement. Martha's intelligence network confirmed my worst fears. The Henderson and Martinez families hadn't been random targets. Their properties sat on the exact footprint Brad's subdivision required. Dolores had systematically terrorized families off specific parcels her nephew needed. Using HOA authority as legal cover for organized crime, I faced an impossible choice. Take the Alaska job and fund my legal fight, but lose my ranch while I was gone. Or stay home, go broke, and watch Dolores bankrupt me with daily fines anyway. That's when Bulldog Hayes played our ace card. Federal civil rights complaint, his voice graveled through my phone. Selective enforcement based on economic discrimination. Pattern of targeting working-class families for property acquisition. We bypass local corruption and bring federal prosecutors to the party. The week before my supposed departure, Dolores cranked desperation to maximum. Private process servers delivered new violations claiming my horses violated residential agricultural restrictions. Immediate removal required or $500 daily fines. The sound of my horses whinnying as strangers invaded their pasture nearly broke my restraint. These weren't just animals. They represented everything my grandfather built, everything Dolores wanted to destroy for profit. But an anonymous board member, Patricia Wells, bless her conscience, slipped me intelligence that changed everything. Dolores planned to attend the auction personally, bidding through Brad to maintain plausible deniability. The fix was in. My century-old oak trees were scheduled for chainsaw execution within 24 hours of the sale. Standing in my kitchen that final morning, I made the decision that would either save or destroy everything. I called Alaska and canceled, losing $85,000 but keeping my ranch in play. My bank account hit zero, credit cards maxed. But I hired private investigator Sarah Charlie and forensic accountant David Park, paying with borrowed money and desperate hope. The smell of cheap ramen became my daily perfume as I survived on 99-cent meals. My grandfather ate beans and cornbread during the Depression to build this place. I could eat processed noodles to save it. Chen and Park struck gold within days, financial records showing Dolores owed $340,000 in personal debt from failed investments. Her nephew's company had been bankrolling her lifestyle while she acquired properties for development. The auction wasn't about HOA compliance, it was about Dolores's financial survival. She needed my ranch to stay solvent, and she'd weaponized her HOA position to guarantee Brad got it cheap. But as I sat reviewing evidence packets in my kitchen, tasting instant coffee and determination, I realized Dolores had made one fatal error. Her entire scheme depended on me being 1,000 miles away when that auction hammer fell. Instead, I'd be standing right there with federal evidence, media coverage, and legal documentation proving the whole thing was criminal conspiracy from start to finish. She thought she was springing her trap, but she'd actually walked into mine. Tomorrow, the hunter would discover she'd become the prey. Sarah Charlie called at 6 a.m., her voice crackling with excitement that made my instant coffee taste like liquid gold. "Jake, forget everything you thought you knew about Dolores. This woman's running a criminal enterprise that would make the mob jealous." Her report spread across my kitchen table like a treasure map to justice. Dolores owed $340,000 from failed Dallas real estate ventures. Her personal mortgage was guaranteed by Manning Development, LLC, Brad's company. She wasn't just harassing me for kicks, she was fighting for financial survival. $50,000 bonuses for each property converted to community compliance, Charlie explained, the smell of fresh investigation files mixing with my growing amazement. Your ranch triggers a $100,000 payout once Brad acquires it. But the real bombshell came from forensic accountant David Park's deep dive into municipal records. Secret development agreement between Manning Development and city planners. The city had committed to extending infrastructure contingent on density improvements, meaning every ranch property had to be subdivided into 8 suburban lots minimum. Dolores wasn't some power-drunk HOA president. She was a paid acquisition specialist for a conspiracy reaching into City Hall. The insurance angle made my blood boil. 3 months before my first violation notice, Dolores had modified my ranch's liability coverage to $2 million, naming the HOA as additional insured. Same week, she started surveying my property with professional equipment. During my divorce, I had learned how insurance modifications could create legal pressure points against property owners. Dolores was planning multiple attack vectors. If harassment didn't work, she'd stage property damage and file massive claims against my coverage. But Park's discovery in the HOA incorporation documents changed everything. Legal boundaries specifically exclude properties over 20 acres, he said, the paper rustling like Christmas morning. Your 40-acre ranch cannot be subject to HOA jurisdiction under their own founding paperwork. Every violation, every fine, every lien, legally invalid because they had no authority over my property in the first place. The municipal boundary change that trapped me was improperly executed. Required public hearings never happened. Property owners over 20 acres should have received individual notifications and legal challenge opportunities. The city had steamrolled proper procedures to help Dolores's scheme. Chen's insurance investigation revealed the pattern I should have recognized earlier. 3 other ranch properties in our area had suffered mysterious storm damage and drainage issues exactly when harassment campaigns peaked. Convenient coincidences that triggered massive liability claims. My oil field experience with equipment failures kicked in. Criminal conspiracies always leave patterns, and this trail led straight to federal racketeering territory. The evidence package was beautiful in its completeness. Financial records proving payment flows between conspirators, municipal documents showing procedural violations, insurance modifications with surgical timing, recorded conversations discussing development schedules and property acquisition strategies. But the nuclear bomb came from environmental impact studies filed for Brad's subdivision project. This document specifically mentions acquiring your ranch through municipal partnership and HOA coordination, Charlie said, her voice carrying the weight of victory. Filed 6 months before you were enrolled in the HOA. The taste of revelation mixed with instant coffee as this sank in. Premeditated conspiracy, federal wire fraud, mail fraud, insurance fraud, RICO violations. Dolores hadn't just bent rules to steal my ranch. She'd committed federal felonies while using government authority to run organized crime operations against American property owners. Tomorrow's auction wasn't about saving my 40 acres anymore. It was about exposing a criminal enterprise that threatened every ranch, every farm, every family property standing between developers and profit. The smell of justice was sweeter than any coffee I'd ever tasted. Time to watch this house of cards collapse in spectacular fashion. The war room materialized in my guest cabin within hours of Charlie's revelations. The smell of old wood mixed with fresh coffee and determination as we transformed the space into mission control for tomorrow's legal ambush. Bulldog Hayes brought reinforcements. Elena Vasquez, a retired federal prosecutor who specialized in municipal corruption cases. Her silver hair and steel eyes promised the kind of courtroom devastation Dolores had never faced. Pro bono, Elena announced, spreading federal statutes across my grandfather's handmade table. Cases like this are why I became a prosecutor. When government authority gets weaponized against citizens, someone needs to fight back. The timeline wall went up first. Photos, documents, and recordings arranged chronologically like a murder investigation. Color-coded strings connected financial transactions to HOA actions, revealing the conspiracy's intricate web. Martha Gonzalez provided witness testimonies while neighbors shared documentation of similar harassment campaigns. Technical documentation became our foundation. Land surveyor confirmed the HOA boundary errors with GPS precision. Environmental engineer debunked every flood hazard claim Dolores had fabricated. The arborist's evaluation of my marked oak trees revealed $200,000 in timber value, destruction of irreplaceable heritage specimens for non-existent violations. But Elena's federal expertise provided the knowledge bomb that changed our entire strategy. Municipal boundary disputes requiring property seizure must include affected landowners in mandatory public hearings before implementation, she explained, the taste of barbecue donated by supportive neighbors mixing with legal victory. No hearing means the entire boundary change is invalid under federal due process requirements. Always research public hearing requirements when local governments make changes affecting your property. This constitutional protection trumps any state or local statute trying to bypass citizen input. The community network exploded overnight. Jake's kitchen table meetings revealed 12 families who'd faced identical harassment from Dolores. 2 ranchers had been forced to sell under precisely the same circumstances. We created secure group communications for sharing evidence and coordinating responses. Media strategy became Elena's specialty. She contacted investigative reporter Marcus Webb at the Houston Chronicle, who'd been tracking HOA abuse statewide. Local TV news producer Sarah Kim expressed intense interest in the municipal corruption angle. Social media campaigns targeting property rights advocates would amplify our message nationally. Financial preparation required creative solutions. I'd refinanced my ranch to fund the legal battle, but neighbors stepped up with a shared defense fund. Local business owners donated services, surveying, document printing, catering for planning sessions. The taste of donated barbecue during strategy meetings reminded me that community solidarity could defeat institutional bullying. The auction counter strategy demanded split-second timing. Elena researched emergency injunction procedures while preparing federal marshals for potential fraud intervention. Our backup plan involved revealing the HOA jurisdiction error minutes before bidding began, but federal officers would be standing by if criminal evidence surfaced during the proceedings. Technical documentation went deeper than surface violations. Historical property records proved grandfather clause protections dating to 1940. Municipal engineering reports contradicted every flood hazard claim Dolores had fabricated. Bank records showed suspicious cash transfers between family members coinciding with harassment escalations. Insurance investigation revealed the smoking gun pattern. Dolores had filed inflated claims against 3 neighboring ranches for mysterious storm damage that coincidentally occurred during peak harassment campaigns. The timing was surgical. Claims filed within days of families reaching financial breaking points from HOA fines. Coordination became military precise. Auction scheduled Tuesday 10 a.m. at courthouse steps. My early return from Alaska planned for Monday night. Media interviews scheduled for Tuesday morning. Federal complaint filing timed for maximum impact during auction proceedings. Psychological preparation included testimony rehearsal with the legal team. Role-playing confrontation scenarios with community supporters helped build confidence for public exposure. Martha coached stress management techniques while Elena prepared cross-examination strategies for potential Dolores testimony. The final evidence package resembled a federal prosecution brief, 200 pages of documentation. Video evidence from security cameras throughout the dispute timeline. Financial analysis proving the fraudulent scheme. Witness statements from affected neighbors. Municipal records showing procedural violations. But the crown jewel was Charlie's discovery of recorded phone conversations between Dolores and Brad discussing property acquisition schedules, development timelines, and bonus payment structures. Audio evidence of criminal conspiracy planning captured on Dolores's own phone calls. As Tuesday morning approached, the smell of legal justice mixed with Texas morning air. Our evidence was overwhelming. Our legal strategy was bulletproof. Our community support was unprecedented. Elena's final briefing carried the weight of federal authority. Tomorrow we're not just stopping an auction. We're exposing a criminal enterprise that's been stealing American family properties through abuse of government power. This case will set precedent for property rights protection nationwide. The taste of anticipated victory was sweeter than any coffee I'd ever brewed in this kitchen. Dolores thought she was closing her trap, but she'd actually positioned herself for maximum legal devastation. Tomorrow, the suburban dictator would meet federal justice, and I'd be front row center watching her empire collapse. My departure for Alaska became the performance of a lifetime. Social media posts from the airport, luggage photos, even a selfie at the gate before boarding a flight that would take me exactly nowhere. Instead, I drove straight to Martha's house, hiding in her guest room like a fugitive in my own hometown. The taste of Martha's homemade tamales mixed with adrenaline as I monitored my ranch through security cameras and neighbor intelligence. Dolores had no idea her prey was watching every move from 2 miles away. Within hours of my supposed departure, she launched her victory lap. Final auction notices went to every neighbor, complete with glossy brochures describing the community improvement opportunity my ranch represented. Dolores bragged to board members about finally solving the ranch problem, while Brad Manning started advertising pre-construction home sales for Manning Meadows, 8 luxury homes where my grandfather's legacy currently stood. But her desperation showed in the sabotage escalation. Survey stakes appeared throughout my property like grave markers, each one spray-painted with lot numbers for Brad's subdivision. The chemical smell of fresh paint mixed with morning dew as cameras captured crews trespassing to place development markers on land they didn't own yet. That's when Dolores hired vandals disguised as a remediation crew. Security footage captured everything in high definition. 3 men with spray paint cans marking condemned across my ranch house, barn, and workshop. Bright red letters screaming emergency evacuation orders from a health department that had never stepped foot on my property. The chemical stench of spray paint mixing with morning air made Martha's coffee taste bitter with rage as we watched the vandalism live through my phone app. Dolores stood directing the operation from her BMW, clipboard in hand, orchestrating property destruction like a general commanding troops. License plates, faces, timestamps, all recorded for federal evidence. Additional charges of criminal trespassing and property destruction to add to her growing rap sheet. But the insurance fraud attempt revealed her true desperation. Dolores filed a $25,000 claim against HOA insurance for emergency property remediation that never happened. The insurance investigator was scheduled for the day after the auction, convenient timing that would allow her to claim legitimate expenses after Brad owned the property. During my years dealing with oilfield insurance, I'd learned that filing false claims constituted federal wire fraud when crossing state lines. Dolores was racking up felonies faster than my grandfather used to rack hay bales. The community pressure campaign showed her losing control completely. Dolores organized a neighborhood petition supporting the auction, threatening legal action against residents who refused to sign. Several elderly neighbors were intimidated into supporting letters, but Martha's network documented every coercive conversation. Private investigator Charlie recorded Dolores coaching petition signers with false information about property values and safety concerns. Audio evidence of witness intimidation would add federal obstruction charges to her mounting legal problems. The bribery attempt was her final desperate mistake. Chen's surveillance captured Dolores offering $10,000 cash to courthouse clerk Janet Morrison for favorable auction scheduling. The meeting happened in Morrison's car behind the courthouse, briefcase full of hundreds changing hands while Charlie filmed from across the parking lot. Morrison immediately reported the bribery attempt to the district attorney. Federal corruption investigation officially began that afternoon. The final intimidation attempt pushed me past restraint. Dolores arrived at my ranch with a commercial towing company, attempting to remove my work trucks as abandoned vehicles through claimed eminent domain authority. The diesel engine noise from tow trucks mixed with my horses whinnying in terror as strangers invaded their pasture. From Martha's guest room, I watched through security feeds as neighbors formed human barriers preventing truck theft. Police arrived but made no arrests due to jurisdictional confusion, exactly what Dolores was counting on. The taste of fury mixed with powerlessness as I fought every instinct to drive home and confront her physically. But Elena's voice echoed in my memory. Federal cases are won with documentation, not confrontation. Every illegal act was being recorded. Every federal crime was building our prosecution case. Every desperate move was sealing Dolores's legal doom. But watching her attempt to steal my grandfather's trucks, vehicles that had worked this land for 30 years, pushed me beyond anger into cold calculation. This woman had declared war on everything my family built, and tomorrow I'd bring federal nuclear weapons to the courthouse steps. The smell of Martha's evening cooking mixed with anticipation as sunset approached. 24 hours from now, Dolores would be in handcuffs and my ranch would be safe. But first, she had to walk into the trap we'd spent weeks perfecting. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and I'd be watching every second of her destruction from the front row. Tomorrow's auction would be her grand finale, just not the ending she'd planned. Auction morning arrived with the crisp bite of Texas dawn and the taste of revenge served cold. I returned early from Alaska at 6 a.m., driving straight to the courthouse with my truck loaded like I'd just stepped off a cargo plane. Local news crews were already setting up, their cameras capturing my apparent shock at the auction signs plastered across the courthouse steps. "I can't believe this is happening," I told Channel 7's morning reporter, my performance worthy of an Oscar. I was working on a drilling platform in the Arctic Ocean and had no idea my ranch was being auctioned today. The crisp morning air mixed with exhaust from news vans as more media arrived. Word had spread through Elena's connections. This wasn't just a property dispute, but a story about government corruption and the American dream under attack. Dolores arrived like she was attending a coronation. Designer victory outfit, expensive navy suit with matching jewelry that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Brad Manning followed in his truck, financing paperwork visible through the windshield. They brought folding chairs for family members to watch the anticipated property acquisition, plus reservations for celebration lunch at the country club. The confidence radiating from that white BMW made my coffee taste like liquid satisfaction. She had no idea federal marshals were positioned in unmarked vehicles around the courthouse square. But the crowd gathering revealed the community impact of her schemes. My neighborhood supporters arrived early, Martha leading a convoy of pickup trucks and determination. Houston Chronicle reporter Marcus Webb positioned for photographs, while Elena coordinated with federal investigators observing from strategic positions. The murmur of crowd voices mixing with courthouse traffic created an electric atmosphere. This wasn't just Jake Thornfield versus Dolores Manning anymore. This was citizens versus corruption, and the whole state was watching. Last-minute intimidation became Dolores's final mistake. She approached me with what she called a generous settlement offer, $100,000 cash for voluntary property surrender, claiming federal investigation would cost more than the ranch was worth. My hidden phone app recorded every word of her attempted bribery. "You're a working man, Jake." Her voice dripped with condescending sweetness that made my teeth ache. "Fighting the system will bankrupt you. Take the money and buy something more appropriate for your lifestyle." That phrase, your lifestyle, carried the same discriminatory undertones I'd heard in our first phone conversation. Audio evidence of her true motivations, captured in high definition for federal prosecutors. The legal ambush preparation moved like clockwork. Attorney Hayes filed emergency motions 30 minutes before the auction. Elena positioned federal marshals for potential arrests while bank fraud investigators coordinated with local sheriff. Media briefing was scheduled for immediately after legal action, maximum exposure for minimum escape time. Dolores's public bragging to reporters became her confession. "I'm finally cleaning up this neighborhood," she told Webb, cameras rolling for the Chronicle's online edition. "We're developing properties for a better class of residents who understand community standards." The words "better class of residents" rang with discriminatory intent that federal prosecutors love hearing in corruption cases. Video evidence of her admitting to coordinated property acquisition for development purposes. Community testimony built like a thunderstorm. Martha addressed the growing crowd about harassment patterns affecting multiple families. 3 other victims shared intimidation stories while local business owners condemned HOA overreach. The sound of papers rustling as neighbors shared documentation created a symphony of citizen resistance. But my emotional moment came seeing those oak trees. Marked with orange spray paint like condemned prisoners, my great-grandfather's 1923 planting stood as silent witnesses to attempted destruction. Each tree represented a century of family heritage that Dolores wanted to chainsaw for subdivision profits. The taste of generational responsibility mixed with morning coffee as I realized this fight was bigger than saving my ranch. This was about protecting every family legacy from institutional predators. The technical discovery provided our final ammunition. Last-minute survey revealed property boundary errors favoring my ranch by 3 additional acres. Survey stakes had been placed illegally on land that belonged to me, not the HOA. Additional evidence of trespassing and attempted theft that would strengthen our federal case. Dolores's desperation peaked with attempted auction postponement. Claiming procedural irregularities and arguing my early return violated abandonment declarations, she tried forcing delay while media presence created unfair pressure on bidding process. The judge refused postponement, ordering proceedings to continue as scheduled. The final setup positioned perfectly. I stood directly in front of the auction podium while Elena's legal team flanked courthouse steps with documentation. Federal investigators moved closer to Dolores and Brad while media cameras focused on antagonists for maximum exposure. The smell of impending justice mixed with diesel exhaust from news trucks as the auctioneer took position. Dolores signaled Brad for opening bids while I prepared to detonate our legal nuclear bomb. The suburban dictator was about to discover the difference between petty power and federal consequences. The auctioneer's voice boomed across the courthouse steps like thunder announcing Judgment Day. We are here to auction property at 4247 Copper Ridge Ranch Road for delinquent HOA fines and liens. Do I hear opening bids? Dolores nodded to Brad Manning, who raised his hand with practiced confidence. $500. That's when I stepped forward with emergency injunction paperwork, my voice carrying across the crowd like a battle cry. Your Honor, this auction cannot proceed due to fraudulent jurisdiction and criminal conspiracy. The auctioneer paused, confusion flickering across his face as he reviewed Elena's legal documents. The crowd fell silent except for camera shutters clicking like mechanical applause. Elena Vasquez stepped into the spotlight like an avenging angel in a business suit. Ladies and gentlemen of the press and citizens of Copper Ridge, her voice projected with prosecutorial authority that made Dolores visibly shrink. We have discovered that this HOA never had legal jurisdiction over Mr. Thornfield's property. Every fine, every lien, every enforcement action of the past 6 months has been fraudulent. The crowd gasped as Elena unveiled our timeline poster showing the coordinated fraud scheme. Financial records displayed on portable screens revealed payment connections between Dolores and Brad, while security camera footage played, showing the spray painting vandalism. Dolores's public meltdown was spectacular. "This is illegal interference!" she shrieked, her perfectly coiffed hair finally showing cracks in the facade. "Jake Thornfield is a chronic violator who refuses to follow community standards. This auction must proceed regardless of these false accusations." Her shrill voice echoed off courthouse stone walls while cameras captured every second of her unraveling composure. The woman who'd terrorized families with bureaucratic precision was dissolving into hysterical desperation before witnesses. Houston Chronicle reporter Marcus Webb stepped forward with recorded phone calls. "Mrs. Manning, would you care to comment on these audio recordings of you discussing acquisition bonus payments with your nephew?" The speakers crackled with Dolores's own voice. "Once we get the Thornfield property, that's another $100,000 in development bonuses plus my commission." The crowd murmured with recognition as her true motivations played for everyone to hear. Brad Manning attempted to flee the scene, pushing through spectators toward his truck, but federal marshals materialized from the crowd like justice incarnate. The arrest was poetry in motion. Elena signaled FBI agents positioned throughout the crowd while wire fraud and conspiracy charges were read publicly. The metallic click of handcuffs around Dolores's wrists mixed with camera shutters capturing her defeat for evening news broadcasts. "Dolores Manning, you are under arrest for federal wire fraud, conspiracy to commit property theft, insurance fraud, and violation of civil rights under color of authority. Agent Sarah Martinez announced loud enough for every news camera to record. Brad Manning's attempted escape ended 20 feet from his truck, tackled by federal marshals while crowds cheered like their team had just won the Super Bowl. My victory speech became a rallying cry for property rights. This is what happens when citizens stand together against institutional bullying, I announced to cameras and neighbors alike. Dolores Manning used HOA authority as a weapon against working families, but she picked the wrong targets. We documented everything, we built our case, and we brought federal justice to our courthouse steps. The crowd erupted in applause while Elena distributed copies of grandfather clause protections and federal civil rights information, knowledge that could protect other families from similar schemes. The domino effect was immediate and beautiful. 3 HOA board members resigned in protest of Dolores's methods before the handcuffs were even removed. Municipal boundary changes came under federal review while other enforcement actions were suspended pending investigation. Neighbors began organizing an independent property rights association focused on genuine maintenance rather than harassment. Martha Gonzalez organized an impromptu barbecue right there on courthouse grounds. Local business owners donated food and drinks while children played and adults shared HOA horror stories. The smoke from grills mixed with sounds of laughter and relief as our community celebrated victory over tyranny. The media coverage exploded beyond our wildest expectations. Houston Chronicle published the full expose within hours. National property rights advocates shared our story across social media platforms. Local TV news featured the story for 3 consecutive evenings while I became an accidental spokesperson for fighting HOA abuse. But the most satisfying moment came when the auctioneer officially canceled proceedings. Due to jurisdictional issues and ongoing federal investigation, this auction is hereby terminated, he announced to scattered applause from the crowd. My ranch was safe. My grandfather's oak trees would live another century. The community was protected from future corruption. Standing on those courthouse steps, tasting victory mixed with barbecue smoke and Texas morning air, I realized we'd done more than save one ranch. We'd proven that citizens armed with documentation, determination, and federal law could defeat institutional corruption at any level. The suburban dictator was in handcuffs, and justice had prevailed. 6 months later, justice tasted sweeter than Martha's homemade peach cobbler served under my great-grandfather's saved oak trees. Federal prosecution delivered crushing justice. Dolores received 18 months in federal prison for wire fraud, conspiracy, and civil rights violations under color of authority. The sight of her in orange jumpsuit during sentencing made my morning coffee taste like liquid vindication. Brad Manning pleaded guilty to avoid trial, receiving probation plus full restitution to every family his aunt had terrorized. The financial recovery blew my mind. Federal court awarded $340,000 in damages and attorney fees, triple damages for fraudulent lien schemes that backfired spectacularly. Insurance fraud investigation revealed 12 additional victims, triggering a class action lawsuit against Manning Development that delivered $2 million in total settlements. My ranch's value soared to $3.2 million after national publicity turned my property into a symbol of successful resistance. Neighbor values jumped 20% without Dolores suppressing the market through harassment campaigns. Community healing transformed our entire area. The new Copper Ridge Property Owners Association formed with transparent bylaws focused on genuine maintenance rather than systematic intimidation. Martha became president, I took treasurer duties, and monthly meetings featured property rights education instead of violation enforcement. The ranch restoration honored both preservation and progress. Those century-old oak trees received professional arborist care and official historical designation. My guest cabin became our community meeting center, while the main house hosted free legal aid clinics twice monthly for HOA harassment victims statewide. Morning coffee on my front porch tasted like freedom. No more diesel fumes from unwanted construction. No more certified mail anxiety, just the peaceful sounds of horses and wind through protected trees. Personal transformation surprised me most. Reducing travel to focus on local consulting work revealed that fighting for home had taught me to value being home. My kids and I grew closer through shared adversity, while Martha became the trusted friend my post-divorce life desperately needed. The Thornfield Foundation became my unexpected calling. Our mission: protecting American families from institutional property theft through education and legal support. The scholarship fund supports law students studying property rights, while our free clinic has helped over 300 families fight HOA abuse nationwide. Educational impacts spread beyond Texas borders. Our case inspired HOA reform legislation in 5 states. National property rights organizations use our documentation strategies as training materials. The annual Freedom Festival at my ranch draws thousands learning about grandfather clauses, federal protections, and resistance tactics. But the sweetest victory was measured in saved family legacies. Ranches, farms, and family homes protected from bureaucratic predators using our legal precedents. This year's Freedom Festival hosted 600 attendees from 15 states. Our legal aid booth helped 52 families with active disputes, while the barbecue fundraiser raised $35,000 for expansion. The smell of mesquite smoke mixed with children's laughter as families enjoyed protections we'd fought to establish. Standing beneath my grandfather's oak trees at sunset, watching kids play where Dolores had planned McMansions, I received the call that promised our next adventure. "Jake, this is Mike Patterson from Arizona. They're using your Dolores playbook against my cattle ranch. Identical tactics, same legal tricks. I've got 3 weeks before they auction my family's 100-year legacy for unpaid fines." The taste of déjà vu mixed with righteous anger as Mike described harassment campaigns that could have been copy-pasted from my own nightmare. HOA President Sandra Walsh was following Dolores's blueprint step by step, suggesting a coordinated national network of property acquisition fraud. "Mike," I said, Elena already nodding approval from my porch swing, "pack every document, video, and receipt you've got. We're bringing federal justice to Arizona, and this time we know exactly how these predators operate." The war against suburban dictators was far from over, but we'd proven that documentation, determination, and federal law could defeat institutional corruption anywhere in America. But that Arizona takedown is a story for next week. Drop your wildest HOA nightmare in the comments below. I read every single story, and sharing these battles helps families recognize harassment patterns before it's too late. Your experience could save someone's generational legacy. If this victory restored your faith in American justice and you're ready for more underdog triumphs against petty tyrants, smash that subscribe button and join the HOA Tales family. Next week, we're exposing how a retired teacher outsmarted an entire city council trying to steal her farm through eminent domain fraud. That courtroom destruction will give you chills.